Welcome to the Great Birth Rebellion podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Melanie Jackson. I'm a clinical and research midwife with my PhD, and each episode I cast a critical eye over current maternity care practice by grappling with research and historical knowledge to help you get the best out of your pregnancy, birth, and postpartum journey. Welcome to today's episode of the Great Birth Rebellion podcast. This topic has been one of the most requested topics. I'm smashing through them this year. I just did the risks of induction episode, which was another big one, and we're tackling lots of others, including I did the RSV vaccine recently. And today we're going to talk about iron deficiency anemia in pregnancy and its implications for pregnancy, birth, and postpartum. The reason I've avoided this topic is because, like so many others, it's fraught. There's lots of different opinions on supplements, whether or not iron deficiency anemia is even a thing. Some people believe that we should be living in an anemic state while pregnant, a controversial idea. And so there's lots of conflicting information. So I'm aiming to keep it relevant and evidence-based for this episode so that you can make decisions for yourself if you're finding yourself having to consider what to do in this scenario if you've got iron deficiency anemia. And if anyone's going to do this topic justice, it'll be myself and my guest who I've got on the podcast today, fellow private midwife and peer, Jaimee Smith. So strap yourselves in. We're about to talk all about iron deficiency anemia, what it is, why it happens, how to prevent it, and how to treat it. And yes, we will talk about iron infusions and the root cause protocol, which some of you may have heard of, but there's so much more than that. Before we launch into today's topic, though, you might have already heard about it, but you might not have, so I'm going to mention it. It's called the Convergence of Rebellious Midwives, and this 2025 conference is shaping up to be one of the best and biggest pregnancy, birth, and postpartum conferences in Australia. This event is happening in about 6 months, depending on if you're listening to this episode as a back catalogue or whether or not you're on target. So in August 2025, but also every year, we have this Convergence of Rebellious Midwives, and already 450 people have bought tickets, and it's still 6 months away. And I know why all these people have booked tickets, because this conference is exceptional, all the way from its speakers to the venue to the experience, everything. I ran the first Convergence last year, and I paid so much attention to how well loved everyone felt. So when I built it, I wanted the people who came to feel that it was the best conference they'd ever been to, and many people told me that. But most of all, I wanted people who came to feel loved. So we ran the conference, and afterwards we surveyed the people who attended, and 100% of the people who responded to the survey said they would definitely come again. So for us, that was a 0% dissatisfaction score. So given the feedback from last year, this year we got a bigger venue, which it's at the International Convention Centre in Sydney, Darling Harbour here in Australia. This allows us more space to not only increase the comfort level for people who come, but also just the overall experience. It's super luxurious. It's in a holiday destination. It just adds to the value of this conference. Now, we want people to come not only to feel like they've learnt something, but also to feel like they've had a mini holiday, had a break and shaken off the general pressure of their usual work and usual life. And so the whole conference is built around the question, how can we love everyone who comes? And I want to honour their time and the financial commitment that they made to coming to this event. And I only want to give you the best. If you're coming to the Convergence, I'm giving you my best. Now, the lineup of speakers is also a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Any one of these individual speakers that we have could keynote a conference and draw a crowd. But this year, we've got Ina May Gaskin. And if you Google Ina May Gaskin, it calls her the most famous midwife in the world. And she's gone above and beyond to create exceptional presentations for the conference. She is technically retired, but she's poured her time and energy into this. If you miss her this time, it's very possible that you won't have a chance to hear from Ina May Gaskin again. It's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. So not only do we have Ina May, but we also have Hannah Dahlen, Hazel Keedle, Barshi Hazard, Pam Douglas, Athena Hammond, Sheena and Anna Byram from the UK, Rixa Fries from the US, Marina Weekend from Germany. I'll be there. Linnell Moran, Kate Levitt, Heidi Williams, and Sarah Smith. There's some others planned. I just can't list everything that's going on in this one little segment. Honestly, I could talk to you without end, but I want to invite you to join us at the Convergence of Rebellious Midwives. It's not just for midwives. You are all welcome. Everyone can benefit from what we're doing here. Tickets are on sale at melaniethemidwife.com. All of the details are in the show notes. Take advantage of the payment plan option. So when you go to purchase at the cart, you can divide your ticket payment over 4 payments. And it's an opportunity to meet me and for me to meet you in one of the most beautiful cities in the world, Sydney Darling Harbour. My guest, Jaimee, will be there too. She'll be there to greet you. So there are many reasons to come to the Convergence of Rebellious Midwives. I'll be there to meet you. Grab your tickets. The details are in the show notes. Righty-o. Let's get into this episode. Welcome to the podcast, Jaimee.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here again.
Yes, Jaimee's been on before. That's right. So I invited Jaimee to the podcast today because we've been peers for a while now. Jaimee is the midwife's midwife, and she's a private midwife in Tasmania, and she's delved deep into this topic and the research in preparation for a class that she teaches to midwives about anemias in pregnancy, particularly iron deficiency anemia. So she's the perfect person to join me today, and I'll put the contact info for Jaimee in the show notes so that you can reach out to her if you're interested in her class or if you want to check out her other work at the Midwife's Midwife. So we'll get into it. So iron deficiency anemia in pregnancy, that's what we're talking about. So many women have this, and I personally as a midwife I offer screening to all of my clients for iron deficiency anemia, particularly because it's just so common. And so many women have been told to go on to supplements or get an iron infusion. But I just think there's so much more that could be done before you get to that point.
Yeah.
And I know, and Jaimee and I have spoken about this too. We actually have very different clinical ideas about some things, which is great and that was actually why I really wanted to invite Jaimee on, because I feel like she brings another perspective to the conversation. All right. So firstly, I want to just explain what iron deficiency anemia is, because we have to mention here there's lots of different types of anemia, and iron deficiency anemia is only one of them. It's the one we're talking about today. We can't really go broader than that. So this is completely isolated to iron deficiency anemia, which is one of the most common ones in pregnancy. But just know that if you've been struggling with anemia and nothing seems to be working, then consider the possibility that it's not iron deficiency or it's compounded by other issues. And so there might be a different management and treatment strategy to treating your particular brand of anemia. You can't just keep throwing iron supplements at everything and assume it's going to work. So that was the first thing I wanted to make sure, if you're listening, that you're not going down the wrong treatment path with anemia by just thinking it's iron. So iron deficiency, as I said, is the most common cause of maternal anemias, but the other ones include things like sickle cell anemias, there's thalassemias, deficiency in folate, B12 or both, malabsorption issues, some infections, and there's heaps more. Some are more rare than others. The other one thing I want to mention before I go any further is that it's important to differentiate the research and understanding of anemias based on low middle income countries or low resourced areas versus anemias and iron deficiencies in well resourced countries, it's kind of a completely different story. And so I just, it, be cautious with the research, because sometimes they talk about it as being a really concerning for kind of maternal well-being long term, but that's often the case in low to middle income countries or high income countries where there's adequate healthcare. The story can be completely different.
I was just going to say that iron deficiency anemia is actually the most common nutritional deficiency affecting pregnant women worldwide. And I think it's about 17% of industrialized or developed countries and about 56% of developing countries. So that's often not recognized, and it really is like a subtle, slow progressing disease. So I think that's also not recognized. So I'm really glad we're talking about this today.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned the slow progressive thing, because I feel like often clinicians think it's just like all of a sudden, oh no, you're anemic. We've got to get
Mm.
you on huge doses of iron supplements, and it's like this should not be a surprise to people because it's such a slow creep and slow crawl.
Yeah.
So yeah, exactly. So anemia itself is the condition of not having enough healthy red blood cells circulating in your body, or the hemoglobin that's part of the red blood cell. And the hemoglobin is part of the red blood cell that carries oxygen around your body. So iron deficiency is just one of the things that can impact on the health and quantity of your hemoglobin, so the quality and quantity. So essentially, anemia is low levels of healthy, full functioning red blood cells, and all the red blood cells have hemoglobin on them. So that's an important distinction here, is that iron deficiency starts before anemia. Anemia is like the end point, the disease process of being chronically iron deficient. So our bodies can function and adapt in the short term to iron deficiency by releasing stored iron so that we don't get anemic. But if it goes on for too long, then we get anemia as a result of being iron deficient or iron depleted for too long. So hopefully you're already starting to see here what Jaimee mentioned just prior to, is that anemia is completely preventable with some forethought and some early intervention. We can detect and treat iron deficiencies before it manifests as anemia. And we will talk about how to prevent anemia and how to identify it as we go through. And we'll talk about how iron deficiency and anemia is diagnosed. And it's sort of two-pronged. We combine what we can find through blood test results with the individual experience of the woman.
Yeah, no, I wholeheartedly agree. I think we're always trying to offer woman-centered care, and I think it's a mistake to just look at the numbers or to just look at the woman. It's definitely always, for my practice, a combination of the both. I've had women whose numbers look fine according to lab reference ranges, which is its own topic, but they feel really rubbish and they're definitely symptomatic, and therefore they need support. And I've had women whose numbers look really poor, but they tell me they feel just fine and they don't want any extra support to boost iron stores. So yeah, I agree. It's definitely looking at the woman and the whole picture, and the numbers that support woman-centered care, not to make her fit in with any particular number.
I have to agree. And I've had clients the same. They feel great, and you're looking at their blood results and thinking, you should not be functioning. And they're like, no, feel fine. It's no problem. And then I actually recall the story of a client. She is actually a GP as well, a medical GP. And she was planning a home birth, and all the blood tests looked great, no problem. And she said, I'm just so tired. Like, it seems unreal, excessively tired. And I said, I don't think it's your iron. She said, well, I'm going to do an iron transfusion because, I want one and I think it'll make me feel better. And I was like, you don't fit the criteria. And she went ahead and did it anyway. Obviously, she's a GP. She has access to what she feels she needs. And she did feel brilliant afterwards, despite her blood test results not looking anything like anyone I would suggest having an iron transfusion. So, yeah, I think this goes way deeper than what we're led to believe. So, in order to diagnose it, firstly, we ask you how you're feeling, and women will express what's going on for them. But then even early on, right at the beginning of your pregnancy, your care provider will offer you an antenatal blood test. So personally, if I'm writing these for my clients, I'll always include iron studies and a full blood count in the antenatal bloods. And often your GP or doctor will do this depending on who's looking after you. And this way we actually have the information right from the beginning of your pregnancy to diagnose if there's a pre-existing iron deficiency or if you might be at risk of anemia, because again, anemia is different to iron deficiency. There's two things we can diagnose. We can diagnose iron deficiency without anemia or iron deficiency with anemia. So the idea of these early blood tests is to see, are you iron deficient but not yet anemic, in which case we can prevent you from becoming anemic through your pregnancy. And this is where I love continuity of care, actually. And one of my issues with the oversupplementation of women with iron is that I think sometimes it comes out of this fragmented care model sometimes where nobody's noticed what's happening for this woman. And then there's like this rescue medicine at the end to try and bring her hemoglobin up, when if somebody was just really paying attention to her through her pregnancy, this could have been picked up way earlier, and the supplements and the strategies could have been gentler and more prolonged rather than this kind of rescue approach.
Yeah, and I think it's a bit of an uphill battle in pregnancy, because I think pregnancy is actually the perfect storm for developing iron deficiency anemia, because you have a greater demand when you're pregnant for iron. Like, iron's needed for over 100 functions in our body. And then when we're growing a baby, a whole other person as well, they obviously need iron to function. Your placenta needs it. And so you might be fine with nutritional intake. And I'm guessing we'll talk about that, the different ways that we can support iron or why we might be iron deficient or anemic. But, usually it's not enough intake or too much demand. And I think pregnancy is the perfect example of a lot of demand. And so sometimes our normal adequate intake isn't enough in pregnancy. And if we leave it too late in pregnancy, I often find there's not the time or capacity to bring it up just with diet alone, sometimes not even with oral supplements alone. So yeah, I agree with you there, Mel. We probably agree actually on most things, but I've just probably had more involvement with iron infusions than your clients. Like, a lot more of mine have had access to that. So yeah.
That's I think where we differ. I feel like we're on the same path most of the way, and then there's this moment of divergence, which is actually completely fine, because it's not about us, it's about our clientele and making sure they're getting the care they need. And so,
Absolutely. Yeah.
So then when we take your blood and we're trying to find out, are you iron deficient? Are you anemic? There's some things that we're particularly looking for when we're diagnosing iron deficiency. And, I don't want to talk about like mainstream system versus what we would do. But generally, the things that your clinician will look for are your hemoglobin levels. And this is measured in your full blood count. And this should be above 110 grams per litre. If you're in Australia and the UK, that's how we measure it. But if you're in the US, they might measure it as like 11 grams per decilitre rather than grams per litre. So if you're in America and you're thinking, whoa, 110, that converts to 11. So just note, if you're sitting there with your blood test results in front of you trying to work out, am I anemic? So that's the first thing, hemoglobin above 110. So if it's below 110, quite potentially you are showing clinical signs of anemia. But then if we want to check if you're iron deficient, you have to look at the iron studies. And when you look at one of the things you can look for is a thing called ferritin, which it represents the stored iron in your body. So your body can have iron that's circulating through your blood. That's one thing. There's hemoglobin. Then there's the stored iron, which is ferritin. So if your ferritin levels are low, but your hemoglobin is normal, then we would sort of suspect that you're iron deficient but not yet anemic. So your body is adapted, and maybe it's finding stores and reorganizing iron through your body to prioritize hemoglobin. But we're getting a warning sign that you're running out. There's soon not going to be any stores. And then when your stores run out, then you start getting the signs of anemia.
Yeah, so actually 70% of your iron is stored in the hemoglobin. So there's not as much as we often think in the ferritin, which is actually what we call our iron stores. But I like to think of ferritin as your money in the bank. So when you have excess money, you put it in the bank. Well, you can do. If you're running out of money, you're going to budget and prioritize where that goes. And that's what happens with iron. And hemoglobin, where 70% of iron is stored, is one of the last priorities of the body. So if your body has budgeted in every other way and then it hits it still doesn't have enough, it's going to have to start taking the stores out of the hemoglobin. And that's when women start to become anemic and very symptomatic. They're probably symptomatic before that, but don't notice it, because a lot of the symptoms overlap with other things in life, just being tired and busy and pregnant. So yeah, I like to think of it like that. Once we're losing our hemoglobin iron stores, our body is getting pretty desperate and really needing to get that iron from somewhere. So yeah.
That's right. And hemoglobin is what carries oxygen around our body. So when you're symptomatic, it's because you're in a state of deoxygenation.
Yeah.
Because the body can't adequately transport oxygen around. So, we don't mess around really as clinicians. We really want to solve this for women, help women solve this. And there is a train of thought, and I'm kind of mentioning it early, and I wanted to just flag it with people. If you're searching on the internet and looking for things, you might find a class of opinions that suggest that maybe in pregnancy we're supposed to be in a state of anemia, or that a drop in hemoglobin is normal and appropriate, and that maybe we shouldn't be dosing ourselves with iron. I just want to say at this point that Jaimee and I are not of that opinion. So come to here thinking, we're going to bolster that theory. I've engaged with that dialogue and tried to understand the science of it, and it doesn't make sense to me based on what I know of what happens in the body. And yeah,
and nor to me, and it hasn't been reflected in my experience. So I think you might be talking about the root cause protocol, or the idea that hemodilution in pregnancy, our blood volume increases by up to 50% in pregnancy. So yes, our red blood cells and our hemoglobin increases, but so does our blood plasma, and that increases more than our hemoglobin. And so it makes our hemoglobin look diluted. If you had half a cup of red food dye, and then you just added another half a cup of water, the red food dye is the same amount, but it looks diluted because there's extra water in it. And that's the idea of this hemodilution, that in pregnancy we have extra blood plasma, and therefore it's just fake anemia or false anemia, because it just makes it look like we have lower hemoglobin based on our blood volume. My issue with that is that there's actually an increased demand in pregnancy for more hemoglobin. So I don't think we can just write off that, that's a normal state in pregnancy. For some women, they might be just fine. Like I said, it always comes back to the woman, but I'm really interested in making sure she feels well, and often pregnancy demands more than what we're supplying. So, yeah.
And that process of hemodilution, which we will cover in detail as we go, yes, that's a physiological part of pregnancy, is the hemodilution, but resulting anemia is not part of normal pregnancy.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, we kind of have to realize that. Some clinicians, or maybe in some bigger systems that have more kind of streamlined care processes, they might not do iron studies early in pregnancy and not be looking at ferritin as a marker. And some places only rely on hemoglobin. And so just be cautious is that although you might not be anemic by looking at your hemoglobin, if your clinician hasn't done iron studies, then you've missed the very early opportunity to potentially prevent anemia. So just throwing it out there. So that's one thing that we look at with our iron studies. And Jaimee, your masterclass on iron deficiency anemia explained the rest of the iron study data in a really succinct way. As I was, I was watching it going, great explanation. So I'm going to throw to you.
Yeah.
You've got sort of 4 other markers that we can have a look at in iron studies that can help us understand what iron's doing in our body and what direction we're heading. Are we heading into more anemia? Is our body looking for iron? Has it got enough?
Yeah.
Can you talk us through the rest of those iron studies and what midwives could look for or clinicians could look for or even women will be able to look at
Yeah.
it?
Absolutely. And I think that's another thing I see a mistake clinicians make is they may order ferritin, but not full iron studies. But if a woman is, especially if she's having iron supplements, I'm very interested to know what the other components of iron studies are, because overloading in iron is toxic and it causes cellular damage and death. And so we really don't want to overload in iron either. And that's what the rest of the iron studies show. So like I said, the first thing I always look at is ferritin. That's like your storage container. How much storage have you got there? Or how much iron do you have in storage? And it depends who you talk to as to what you want to diagnose. I guess we might come back to that in a sec. But the other components of iron studies is something called transferrin. And I like to think of them as transporters. That's what helps me remember it. So if you like, they're little utes going around your body trying to look for unbound iron. That's excess iron that your body doesn't need immediately, and it wants to take that iron up and take it to where it's needed or put it into ferritin for storage. And so that's really important. We want our transferrin to be between our numbers, but to be between 2 and 2.5 grams per litre. If we've got more than 2.5 grams coming back on an iron studies, then that really shows we've got lots of transporters. So some people call that iron hunger. That's our body it's looking for more iron because the body is indicating I'm really depleted, I need iron, and the transporters are trying to find it. And then the saturation part of the iron studies is saying how many of those transporters are being used, what amount of them is saturated or being used. So optimal is between 20 and 30%. So if our saturation comes back as over 30, then that really shows that we're over supplementing. And so we'd want to ease off on our oral supplements because the capacity of the transferrin to catch that iron and take it safely to where it's needed is already full. And therefore, that would leave dangerous unbound iron circulating in the blood. And that's where people get worried about over supplementation and iron toxicity. So it's really important that we know those. And then the final number in iron studies or the area is just the serum iron. It's often just listed as iron. I actually don't even hardly look at that because that's kind of like, if we stick with the money analogy, that's like the cash in your wallet. That doesn't give a very good indication as to what your actual financial status is. So serum iron just happens to be the amount of circulating iron in your blood at the time you had the blood test. What's far more important is what's being moved into storage and how much. So that's just a sort of an extra little thing that I don't put much weight in. So yeah, that's your iron studies, and that's why it's really important to understand each of those. And I didn't used to understand them. As midwives, I didn't get taught this when I did my training. It's only when I went into private practice I thought, wow, I have a really big gap in my knowledge here. I want women to feel well, and so I want to understand this. And I really love being able to get information into a simple, easier to understand way so I can apply it and so other people can apply it. So, yeah.
And often when you get the blood test results, the lab will tell you what the normal reference ranges are. So you don't have to go hunting for that. If you've got your own blood test in front of you and you can see that your iron studies are deranged, you've got the capacity to find out, what levels are high, what levels are low. And you can ask your care provider, what does this mean? Am I looking down the barrel of potential iron
Yeah.
deficiency.
I was just going to say the tricky thing with the reference ranges from the lab, I know they vary from lab to lab, but for example, my reference range for ferritin is 20 to 160. And so I made the mistake early on in private practice thinking, well, as long as a woman's over 20, she's probably okay. 20 to 160 is a huge range. So the hematologist in my area, who I've used a lot of his research, he's a professor of hematology, and he would suggest that if your ferritin is 20 to 30, then you have severe iron deficiency. If it's between 70 and 100, you have mild to moderate iron deficiency. And if it's over 100, it's unlikely to be iron deficient. So his numbers are very, very different to most clinicians. And I think, especially in pregnancy, women often do need a bit more iron. And so I think his reference ranges are probably more accurate. I've had so many of my clients end up having extra iron through iron infusions, and not one of them has ever regretted it. They have all felt better. And some of them I've not been sure. I've looked at the lab results come back and I think, oh, I don't know. I'm not sure. She might be a bit symptomatic. I'll offer her a referral to the hematologist and off she'll go. Because really, I'm just wanting another opinion. That's his area or their area of expertise. And if he gives them an iron infusion, not one woman has ever regretted. She's never said to me, I wish I didn't do that. Most of them say, I wish I had it earlier. So that's why I've ended up probably having more clients have iron infusions than you, Mel, because I've had easy access to that. And I guess over the years, I've just realised women feel better for it in pregnancy. I'm not saying that's necessarily the best management option for a non-pregnant woman. You have time and there's all sorts of different factors when you're not pregnant.
Yeah. So what Jaimee's talking about too is I don't think I've ever had a client that I've recommended an iron infusion for. That one client that I mentioned earlier, the GP, is the first one who's like, I'm getting an iron infusion. And I was like, are you sure? Mostly because I've always been able to, well, firstly, early identification.
Yeah.
And then all of my clients have been able to get their levels up and improved with a particular oral supplement regime that I recommend. I'll talk about later. So, yeah, I just haven't kind of pursued it. And possibly also I'm really, finicky about sending women to places for more things. But like you said, if you've got easy access, you might be more willing to kind of go, yep, off you go. It's easy. Don't worry about it. So we'll talk about iron infusions, but that's where Jaimee and my strategies differ is, not saying anything's right or wrong. We're just kind of doing what we know.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So those are the blood tests, but certainly probably if you're going through a mainstream system and you don't have an individual clinician who's really combing through your blood results thoroughly, then probably your clinician's going to use hemoglobin and ferritin as a way of diagnosing. But if you look at the other things in your iron studies, that's where you would get more of information about what you need to do next. So there's that one part of being able to tell if you're iron deficient or anemic, but then there's your personal experience and your personal symptoms. So as Jaimee said, it manifests as a lot of things that we already feel sometimes as busy women, but tiredness, breathlessness, actually visually pale. So feeling breathless after just doing things, like if you've gone to the top of a flight of stairs that you always take and then you get to the top and you've really got to take a few big breaths and you're feeling really breathless, consider that your body's struggling to move oxygen around. Heart palpitations, feeling just faint or dizzy, foggy, like just generally being unable to, like just feeling constantly foggy through the day, and headaches, cold extremities. But really it's all symptoms of oxygen deprivation and the fact that your body doesn't have the nutrients it needs to properly function. The other one is, and people might be out there, women might be out there going, oh my gosh, that happened to me. There's a thing called pica, Pica, and it's this desire to, sometimes women want to eat ice, but they might also want to eat things like clay, dirt, bricks. I've heard women talk about just wanting to scrape the mortar out of bricks and like lick the wall, like this insatiable desire. It's called pica. It's a thing. If you're thinking, gosh, I just want to eat that thing and it's not food, think about what your body's trying to tell you. Maybe you're iron deficient. In fact, there are some places. I had a client who was from India, and she said in India, sometimes they'll offer pregnant women clay pills, tablets to take, thinking like, okay, this yeah, if you want clay, here, have clay. But I'm like, wait, I think that's iron deficiency. It could be for a whole other reason. But I did have an Indian client. She goes, oh, yeah, in India, we take clay tablets. And I was like, I know that could be a detoxification thing. But anyway, so there's all these symptoms that you could have that could be related to your iron status. So if you're not sure, we do also just, if women are feeling that, maybe they do need more iron, even if their blood tests are not screaming that at us. So let's talk about why this happens in pregnancy and why we monitor for it. And we alluded to it before, that pregnancy is a time of huge nutritional demand. Your iron needs do increase to facilitate the growth of the baby and of the placenta. First, you've got to keep meeting your own iron needs, but then there's all these additional iron needs. And there's also significant changes in your blood volume. So the amount of blood that you actually have in your body. And they've had a look to see what happens to blood volume, and it increases. By the end, you've got 50% more blood than you had before. So in the first trimester, it's about 5% more. It's about 25% more in the second and 50% in the third trimester. So if you started pregnancy with 5 liters of blood, by the end, you've got 7.5 liters. And that's a huge change in a short period of time. It needs high inputs. And as Jaimee said before, there's this process of hemodilution where your blood gets diluted. There's less red blood cells and blood components per mil of blood. And what happens is your body increases the plasma, which, in our analogy is the water. And, red food dye, or think about colloidal, for example. If you've got a certain part, 1 part colloidal, and you add water, it keeps getting more and more diluted. And this is the physiological anemia of pregnancy, is the hemodilution. So hemodilution is normal, and your body can adapt to it gradually, so long as it has all of the components it needs to, firstly, it could make new blood cells. But actually what they also find is that the red blood cells that you already have adapt, and they become bigger and more efficient at doing their job of carrying oxygen around. So although you're diluting the blood, your red blood cells sort of go, oh, time to adapt. We need to be more functional, more efficient, get a bit bigger so that we can keep doing our job. So yeah, think about that as the colloidal, extra plasma, extra water, your blood dilutes. That's completely normal, yes, but anemia is not normal. So how do we make sure we're getting enough iron, but also not too much iron? Because there is this thing called iron toxicity, because iron actually recycles in the body. So there's some nutrients that, B nutrients and vitamin C's, there's things that are water soluble and that actually also have, or fat soluble, but they have a mechanism for removal from the body if you have too much. The only mechanism that iron has for leaving your body is through blood loss. So that happens for women who are bleeding every month. Obviously, you don't bleed, hopefully, while you're pregnant. It's also why women are more just predisposed to anemias than men, because men don't have regular bleeding events. And in fact, if there's a man that's iron deficient, they start to suspect things like internal bleeding, like where is the iron going? So there's this balance. I wouldn't recommend just taking iron without checking if you first need it. So it's not one of those things of like, yeah, you'll be fine. It's like a B vitamin where you take it. If you don't use it, your body just wheezes it out and off it goes. Iron is super different. So there is a possibility of overdosing on iron, which is damaging and toxic to our tissues. And that's the reason why our body is actually great at actively preventing or allowing iron to enter the bloodstream or not. So there's a process that your body has already to choose to decline iron absorption, where it's sort of like, nope, you can't commit. Even if you eat high iron foods or you're taking supplements, your body has the capacity to do that. But, and I don't want to be too like scientific about it and wordy about it, but there is a compound called hepcidin, which I'm every time I hear that word hepcidin, I think of Poseidon. And so anyway, I call hepcidin the goddess of iron.
That's brilliant. I love it.
Hepcidin, goddess of iron. She controls who comes and who goes. And it's like, yeah, it's like Poseidon, but hepcidin.
Yeah, that's brilliant. I love our analogies, Mel. We're going with red cordial and utes and goddesses.
Yes.
Brilliant.
Like the queen, the boss, the goddess.
Yeah.
She kind of stands guard. And hepcidin decreases the level of iron. So the more hepcidin you have, the less absorption of iron you have. So she reduces dietary absorption and inhibits iron release from cellular storage. So if you've got some stored, but you've just had this huge dose of iron somehow, she'll stop iron from being released from your stores, because we don't want that free floating iron just floating around our blood volume causing damage. So hepcidin is interested in keeping it either locked up or out of our bodies. Hepcidin production increases when iron levels rise above the normal range and therefore inhibits unnecessary absorption. And so this is the protective mechanism against iron toxicity.
Yeah, it also increases throughout the day. So you have lower levels of hepcidin in the morning and higher levels in the evening. I guess that's naturally in case we eat too much iron throughout the day.
Yes, that it can periodically stop us from absorbing too much. And this role of hepcidin, you might be like, why are you telling us about the goddess of iron? This will become important later as we start to discuss iron supplements. And it's our body's natural way of making sure that we don't overload on iron. And this is where my question is around iron infusions. Because hepcidin's really responsive to iron deficiency and iron overload. So it'll regulate it. So if you're iron deficient, your hepcidin will reduce, which means you've got more capacity to uptake iron from your diet or when you take oral supplements. But if you've overloaded, it won't allow that. So that's kind of a digestive barrier. So my question and my thoughts are, when we override that digestive barrier and that capacity of our body to prevent iron absorption, and we do direct IV, or you can also do injectable intramuscular iron, what are we doing to our body's natural capacity to like resist it? And have we forced iron into a bloodstream that didn't want it or need it in the first place?
For someone who's really depleted in iron or really iron deficient or anemic, it can be very slow to be able to get iron into stores orally because of hepcidin. And we actually only absorb a very small amount of iron out of iron supplements. And so, yeah, an iron infusion bypasses that and speeds up the process, which is why I think it's valuable in pregnancy. If a woman's really depleted and symptomatic, it's a fast way to boost her iron stores and give her the iron she and her baby need. So the only time we will actually store iron is if we have excess iron in our blood. And so it's a very delicate dance trying to do it orally because, yeah, hepcidin will jump in and try and prevent us having too much excess. So therefore the process is slow. And sometimes, especially in pregnancy, we don't have the time to boost our iron slowly. And therefore, that's probably why there is a place for iron infusions at times. Some people have absorption issues in their body. There's all sorts of reasons for that. They may have some sort of irritable bowel syndrome, or thyroid issues affects their stomach acid and therefore they can't absorb iron very well that way. And you actually need iron to create thyroid hormones. And so if you don't have enough iron, you're not making the stomach acid to absorb the iron, and it's a vicious cycle. So some people just can't win with the oral supplements, and therefore I think that's the place for iron infusions. my first route is always go as natural and as close to biology and physiology as possible. So I don't jump to iron infusions straight away. I suppose my take is I'm grateful they're there when we need them for certain seasons in life. But I agree. I think we are probably doing something, it's quite an intervention. But some people do seem to need that because other systems in their body are out of whack, or they're just healing from other things and they just can't get what they need orally or through their diet.
And particularly if women find themselves kind of like, oh my gosh, nobody really thoroughly checked, and here I am
Yeah.
now needing it. And when Jaimee says like it's slow to recover, we're probably talking, I mean, from experience, if I've recognized that a woman needs iron supplementation, I notice a change in her bloods. I wouldn't check any sooner than like 2 weeks. And that's only if she's getting close to the end of her pregnancy. Probably ideally, I'd check again in 4 weeks to see what impact the supplementation has been having. You should see a difference within 4 weeks if anything's gonna happen.
Mm-hmm.
You'll start to see things creep, but it's not like going from, if your hemoglobin was 100, all of a sudden in 4 weeks it's gonna be 120. It might be 104 in 4 weeks, and then it might be 110. I feel like it's this exponential creep. Like, once it starts to change, then it really changes. But yeah, it's a slower creep. Hence why I think early intervention, a really great approach, is rather than waiting and seeing what's gonna happen. We know that your hemoglobin's gonna go down, theoretically. We know that your ferritin stores are gonna be used up and depleted. We know that you have increased iron needs. So why sit and wait and see what happens when you can prevent it from happening in the first place? And, you could consider something like second daily supplementation rather than daily supplementation, or lower dose, because it's not like if you have a supplement or some food with iron in it, it's not like, oh, great, I had all this iron. It's not just going to soak into your body, and be used. Your body will only take a certain amount of iron per day,
Yeah.
which is why there's this slow creep. Like, it doesn't matter how much you put in, it'll only let in a small amount.
Yeah.
So yeah, what you take is not what's absorbed. And then even more so, the type of iron impacts,
Yeah.
you hinted to it earlier, the bioavailability of that iron. There is some irons are more bioavailable, so actually available for absorption, than others.
And that differs from person to person too. I had one woman on spirulina only, and she took up so much iron from that we had to stop it. And other women, it doesn't help them enough at all. So each person, like, what works for me might not be what works for you either, and that's really worth remembering and understanding. It's a bit of trial and error. Yeah.
It is. And it also depends on what your dietary needs are. So, for people who are vegetarian or vegan or pescatarian, who are having less red meats, which is a really valuable source of iron, you can definitely still get iron from other sources, but you have to be conscious about it. When you eat red meat, you can sort of, not accidentally, but, systematically keep topping up your iron quite easily, whereas you have to be a bit more thoughtful about it if you're getting it from vegetable or other sources.
Yeah. And if you're eating vegetable-based iron in food sources, you'll absorb that better if you have that with meat. So obviously high iron foods would be like beef, lamb, liver, sardines, but there's also iron in things like, spinach, lentils, spirulina, beans, quinoa, kale, nettle, cacao, things like that. But you will absorb those plant-based irons better if you have any sort of meat with it. So even like chicken or poultry or seafood, like, it will just help your body take it up better. And if you have sort of citrusy foods, anything with vitamin C in it will help you absorb it better too. So strawberries, capsicum, tomatoes, broccoli. Yeah.
Kiwi fruit, even vitamin C supplementation.
Yeah.
And so vitamin C increases the uptake of iron.
It sort of inhibits hepcidin from blocking it. So they're the two approaches to helping absorb iron better. You could take your supplements every 2 days They reckon that hepcidin probably, if you have an oral iron supplement, hepcidin then comes to the party more than just from a diet, and it hangs around for about 24 hours. So that's where the idea came from, of taking oral supplements every 2 days. So you can do that to try and counteract or to absorb as much as you can without hepcidin blocking it. Or you can take 1,000 milligrams of vitamin C with your iron supplement every day, and that will help block hepcidin from blocking the iron, if that makes sense.
For those who are supplementing with iron, just know that a lot of iron supplements are not what we would call food-based. They don't just rummage through food, find the iron and put it in a tablet and give it to you. That's not how most iron supplements are made. So the common ones that your clinician will put you on if you're kind of going through a more, they're medically trained people. Ferrograd C and Maltopha are the really common ones that I've seen. These are not what we would call food-based irons, and they can have the side effect of constipation because it's kind of it's a formulated medicine, obviously for iron deficiency, and they're really high doses. So I feel like these particular types of supplements do put the body on high alert, but also they don't have great bioavailability, and then they also have side effects. The benefit of a food-based supplement is that you reduce some of those side effects. The bioavailability is better because your body is already available to food sources of nutrition, and I believe it doesn't peak your hepcidin as much as the other types of supplements. So when I say food-based supplements, some women talk about beef liver capsules, offal capsules, herbal supplements that are high in iron, or magical fairy water, as I call it. So I just want to say, I don't. Definitely had an opportunity to get sponsorship for this podcast.
Yeah.
And I consciously decided not to.
I wondered, are we saying brands?
Yeah. So here's where I'm mentioning this, is there are 3 particular brands of iron supplements that I routinely and kind of have forevermore used in my clinical practice to help with iron deficiency. And again, as I said, could have definitely sought out sponsorship for this podcast. These particular brands, but I decided not to because I just want to let everybody know that I have been using these forever, and I'm not mentioning them because I'm getting any kickbacks or anything like that. This is an unsponsored podcast episode. But the supplements that I choose to use seem to be more food-based. They're lower dosage, and I've had excellent results. So I will.
Well, we're just talking about as midwives, aren't we? What we've seen working in our practice. So this is not because we are affiliated with any brands. We're just telling you what's worked for people based on our clinical experience.
Correct.
Good.
Yes. There's only been that one single client of mine who's gone ahead and had an iron transfusion, and everybody else has managed to avoid it with this particular protocol. So I'm going to tell you what I do for my clients. Again, this is rooted way back in when I trained as a naturopath originally before I was a midwife. So I have some residual nutritional knowledge and obviously a lot of knowledge about the body. So I use a particular product called Floridix, which is a herbal iron supplement. Super low dose. I think it's about 10 milligrams per dose, which is, if anybody said, well, that's going to do nothing, but really bioavailable because it's a liquid and it's food-based. Then there is this other product called Spartone. And I wish I had another way to describe it, but they've found this stream of water that is high in elemental iron. It must be minerals coming off some kind of, somehow into the water. They collect it in sachets and sell it as the product Spartone. Honestly, with those 2 things alone, Floridix and Spartone, most of my clients have managed to recover from any form of iron deficiency in their pregnancy before it's become an issue and before we need to go to something else. If those 2 things don't work, I recommend this 3rd supplement, and they recommend that they take them all together, not together in one go, like just scatter them through the day. There's another product by a brand called Bioceuticals. It's a the brand, but you can get it over the counter. Like, it's behind the counter if you go to a chemist or a health food store, and it's called Iron Sustain. Again, low doses. If you told people you were using these to correct iron deficiency, they would laugh at you because the doses look so low, but they have high levels of bioavailability,
Yeah.
which means that, yeah, more of that product is available for absorption into your body than in some other less food-based products.
Have you tasted Spartone, Mel?
I have, because I took it through my own pregnancy. I had the weirdest thing happen. My hemoglobin when I was first pregnant was 148, which is quite high. I've never even seen anybody's hemoglobin that high. So much so that we thought maybe I might have hemochromatosis. I don't. I knew I didn't, but I thought, my gosh, I'm going to be totally fine. When we rechecked things, and I don't even know if I had iron studies actually, because I just thought I've never had a problem.
Yeah.
Why would I check it? But my hemoglobin dropped to like 107 from 148. It was insane.
Yeah.
And so for the first time in my life, I had to think about iron supplementation. And I started taking it, and there wasn't a lot of effect initially. And then I spoke to a naturopath friend of mine because, I've still got naturopath friends. And she said there's lots of other ways that you can increase iron absorption. And so she said, don't have the iron supplements anywhere near dairy food, caffeine. Obviously, add the vitamin C, like we've already mentioned. And she recommended things to help improve my digestion. She told me to eat bitter greens, and at the time, and I still am an avid gardener, so I had things like dandelion leaves and rocket, so like bitter greens, to get digestive juices started to sort of prime my digestive system to be at peak, absorption. And so I did all those things and the supplements, like really low doses, and it came good just fine.
To me, I struggle with the aftertaste of Spartone. It tastes like liquid blood. Not that I've ever drunk blood, but I can taste it's got that metallic
It's got a
taste. But I tried an apple-flavoured one that someone gave me, and that was much more tolerable. So if you're sensitive to taste, that might work better.
You can also if you freshly juice some oranges,
That's a great idea.
Yeah, try not to get store-bought orange
Yeah.
juice. There's all kinds of stuff. But if you can freshly juice a few oranges, and then I used to put the Spartone in the orange juice, and you can't taste it.
Great.
It looks like water.
Yeah,
And
it does.
so,
Yeah.
yeah, you're tempted to just chug it down, and you can. It does have a metallic taste, though.
Yeah, I had a client whose numbers were bad, and she told me she felt just fine. And I had a heap of Spartone samples from a conference I'd been to, and they left them behind and said, "Could you give these out or use them?" I said, "Yes, thank you." And she took Spartone only and felt so much better for it over time. And she said, "I didn't realize how rubbish I was feeling until I corrected it." So, yeah, I think it's very effective if you can find a way to drink it. The other food-based supplements I really love is Ancestral Nutrition. They have one called Primal Energy, and it's full of organ meats, which is really our original superfood, and most of us are not eating organs anymore, and that's probably why many of us are iron deficient, if not anemic. Foraged is another company that do a beautiful food-based supplement. It used to just be as like a little shot, and it has organ meat in it as well, but now it's in a capsule as well. So I love those two as well. So I think it's good to start with food-based options and whole foods and looking at that holistic approach. Sometimes though, like you had happen, Mel, like you thought you were just fine, and then you check at another point in pregnancy and you really dropped or crashed. Sometimes women need something else.
That's right. And so those food-based ones, typically, I wouldn't even suggest rechecking until 3 or 4 weeks after.
Yeah.
You're not checking for complete cure.
No.
You're just checking for, are we heading in the
right direction?
Yeah. Are these supplements going to do what we need them to do, or like, do we need to do something different? And actually, I had another client who, her and her son were on Maltofa, the more pharmaceutical iron recommendation, She was on it for 3 years, as was her son, who was only little. He wasn't even at school yet, and both still really struggled to get their iron levels up, and they were still constantly anemic. And I said to her, "Well, you've tried it for 3 years. How would you like to try something else?" And she's like, "Oh, I'm open to it." I mean, she's like, "I'm on it, but it's not doing anything."
Mm.
I put her on the Floridix, Spartone, and Bioceuticals combination. Within weeks, she was like, "I feel amazing." She put her son on it too. He wasn't on the iron sustain, just the 2 liquid irons at that point. And we checked it, and you could just see their bodies, like, soaking it up,
Yeah.
like summer rain. And she was so angry at her
Yeah.
GP for not offering her something different. And she was so inspired that she actually went off and studied naturopathy in the end.
Wow.
"I can't believe this has happened. The doctor told me to do this and it didn't work and no one listened. And, there's such simple solution. Over-the-counter food-based iron
Yeah.
supplements did the trick." And I think when you combine lots of different ones, you also increase the bioavailability again,
Yeah.
all the options. And actually, you mentioned it earlier too, hepcidin is lowest in the morning. So aim for iron
Yes.
supplementation in the morning. But then also not just, like, loading it all. If you can scatter it through the early part of the day and kind of drip feed it, you might actually increase the absorption than putting a whole bunch in at one time.
Absolutely. And that's what I always say to my clients too. And so it really depends if you're talking about heme supplements or non-heme. Most oral supplements are non-heme, so they're more of a plant-based supplement, but they're bound up with all these other things like Ferrograd C, which is one that most people have probably heard of, is very commonly prescribed by GPs, like Multifer. But it's ferrous sulfate. Like it's probably you only absorb between 1 and 15%. So it has a big number on the front. So there's elemental iron and the chemical compound. On the front of your iron bottles, it'll have a big number. Like Ferrograd C says 325 milligrams of ferrous sulfate. So you think, wow, I'm taking in a lot of iron, but actually that's not the number to look for. You want to look on the back of your supplement and it has the elemental iron. So Ferrograd C, the elemental iron's 105. If you're only going to absorb 1 to 15% of that, you're only actually absorbing 1 to 16 milligrams of iron. And that's why women have all sorts of gastrointestinal issues or it just doesn't work very well. And because that's a non-heme iron, that's going to be blocked by all sorts of things like not just tea and coffee and calcium, but magnesium, turmeric, whole grain, soy, nut, legumes, fibers, pretty much anything that you might eat at breakfast time. And you're needing to have it 1 to 4 hours away from all those things that will block its absorption. So it's really problematic. You can see why people don't actually get very much iron from some of these mainstream oral supplements.
Which is why I just think the food-based
Yeah.
iron is such a hack because your body's used to just
Yeah.
receiving that kind of nutrition.
The opposite to non-heme would be a heme oral supplement, and they're animal-based or meat type supplements. So they're still considered an oral supplement, but their absorption's way higher, like at least 35% up. And you don't have to have all the cofactors like the vitamin C. You don't have to avoid any meals. Like you can have it with your meals. So I really love that. My favorite brand is 3 Arrows Simply Heme. Once again, I have no association with any company, but I just find that works. It's hard to get in Australia. So I also use a lot of the ones that you have said already for women that are on oral supplements and sometimes a combination.
And also, I think one thing that deters women from choosing the food-based supplements is they are more expensive.
Yeah.
But they're way better quality, and I do believe you're gonna get better results. The chemist ones are cheaper, but they're not as effective, and they're the ones that have the
On the side effects.
side
Yeah.
effects. So, yes, they're just acknowledging that some people are like, I can't spend.
Yeah, that's right. And that's actually some of the reason some of my women have chosen, or my clients have chosen an iron infusion because it actually has worked out more economical for them in terms of what they're spending.
Well, let's talk about iron infusions, because a lot of women are being offered it now. When I first started in private practice, it was really quite unusual to have an iron infusion, and now it feels like they're just doling them out to women all the time. Women often get offered it, and it's usually closer to the birth where they're like, "Oh no, we need to get your hemoglobin up before the birth,"
Mhm.
because they're thinking of you, when you lose blood through the labor
Yeah.
and birth process, that, that's going to impact you afterwards. But I mean, iron is super important all the way through your pregnancy. I
Yeah.
feel like missed as well. It's like, it's not just this rescue mission at the end of your pregnancy to just get this hemoglobin number on your blood test results so that you can stay in the home birth program or stay in the birth center or feel really good after the birth. It's actually like, how do we have sustained wellness all the way through our pregnancy?
Yeah.
But yes, so an iron infusion, it's IV, so intravenous through your vein. They will insert a cannula and you get it directly, IV. And there is also intramuscular I've seen used. It's not as common anymore. They're a little bit sore because they go into your muscle. So they still actually take some time to work, because your body still has to go through that process of soaking it all up, storing it away, converting it into hemoglobin. There's a lot of processes. So even then, it's not kind of the quick fix. So yeah, they give you a single dose and you don't have to have any supplements after that. So that's, some women like that. They're like, put it in and off I go. I don't have to think about daily supplementation. It's all there. But you still need to wait about 2 weeks to feel the full effect and to actually see that change on your blood test. So it's not like I'll have my iron infusion yesterday and then today I'm all good. There's still a process that we have to wait for. Jaimee, how do you describe the process of getting an iron infusion to women?
There's been quite a few different types of iron infusions over time, but the two most common ones that most clinicians will be familiar with, one of them is called iron polymaltose. That has to be given over about a 90-minute period. So you're talking an hour and a half. It's one dose of up to 2,000 milligrams. It's considered safe in pregnancy. They'll often give women a test dose, like a small little 100 milligram dose over half an hour first, just to check that they're not going to have a negative reaction. And they'll often give women now antihistamines or low dose steroids before they have the iron infusion, just to reduce their potential reaction to it or any negative side effects. So that, when I started in midwifery practice 10 years ago, was certainly the main ones we were doing in hospitals.
Yeah.
But there's another one now. Its common name is Ferinject, or it's the ferric carboxymaltose, and that's a quick iron infusion. It's given over 15 minutes, and it's also considered safe in pregnancy. Both iron infusions, based on the research that I've looked into, is considered to be better tolerated than oral, or more effective, obviously, that at quickly raising ferritin and hemoglobin than oral supplements. And this Ferinject is also considered more effective than the polymaltose that's over a longer period of time. So it really rapidly restores iron. And the research that the haematologist in my area has done and published shows that much better outcomes for mums and bubs when they do have their iron stores boosted. And I think with all iron infusions, women usually sit for about half an hour afterwards just to once again check for any reaction. So some of the side effects from iron infusions, like a common side effect, which is considered 1 in 10 women might experience these, would be like headaches, some dizziness, maybe some high blood pressure temporarily, bit of flushing, nausea, or sometimes a site reaction where the drip went in. And they're usually transient side effects. Some uncommon ones, so the ratio for that is considered less than 1 in 100, so would be an actual allergic reaction to the iron infusion. Sometimes tingling, numbness, a racing heart, low blood pressure, shortness of breath, some sort of pain throughout the body. And then sometimes if the drip has leaked into the woman's arm, you get a permanent tattoo like stain. So that's something to be aware of. Like if you're offered an iron infusion, just keep an eye on it. Make sure someone's keeping an eye on it. And obviously a rare side effect would be an anaphylactic reaction to the iron.
Is it commonplace to offer an antihistamine or a low-dose steroid prior to?
Yeah, well, it seems to be here in the clinic that I'm near. The women often tell me that they're offered that. Yeah, and that's meant to help just reduce reaction, I believe.
Reactions to
Yeah.
So I guess for women listening, just know that if you're considering the iron infusion, there might be additional medicines that go along with
Yeah,
that,
that's right. And
depending on the philosophy you have about what you want to.
yeah, exactly. And you can decline those, obviously. You always have the right to get the information you need and make a decision that feels right for you.
And I think ultimately, as with everything, prevention's better than a cure.
Yes.
So early on, if those early blood test results, pay extra special attention to the iron stores, your iron studies, your hemoglobin, how you're feeling as a woman, also your history. Are you typically running anemic anyway prior to being pregnant? Something to really focus on, especially if you want to avoid an iron infusion, if that's the philosophy that you have, then yeah, just being consciously topping up all through your pregnancy and keeping.
Yeah, I agree. Like if you can raise your ferritin, your iron stores before you fall pregnant, you'll do much better. Once they drop, it's harder to get them back up in pregnancy once again because of that demand. If you can sort of boost yourself beforehand in a natural way through your diet or food-based supplements, yeah, I think that's a great idea.
Absolutely. So, one last thing I want to talk about, and the only reason I want to talk about it is because if you're anemic and you're looking for solutions and you start Googling, you will probably come across something called the root cause protocol. I certainly don't endorse it, mostly because it just doesn't make sense to me. From a naturopathic perspective, I have multiple health degrees. Some of them are in complementary therapy. There's a lot of, research and work that I've done in anatomy and physiology, nutrition, nursing, midwifery. I feel like I have the capacity to understand a lot of things, but I really tried. I really tried to understand the root cause protocol. I went through their website. They do have a course, which I did not purchase, but I just couldn't make sense of how they were trying to explain it. I did take away that they believed that we were supposed to be in a low hemoglobin sort of hypoxic state by the end of pregnancy and that was somehow a normal physiological part. I also think, Jaimee, that they're against the storage of iron in the
Yeah.
body. And they don't believe that measuring ferritin is even an accurate measurement for diagnosing anemia.
Yeah, I don't follow them either and don't agree with their underlying philosophy, but my understanding is that like they've written an article called The Deceit of Anemia. So they are more interested in or believe that problems in someone's body isn't from anemia, it's from an imbalance of other minerals like magnesium, copper, and iron together. And I think they do look at ferritin, but they're happy as long as it's above or around 30, which the hematologist in my area would define as severe iron
Yeah.
deficient. So, yeah, they actually tell people to stop taking iron supplements, to stop taking vitamin D, which helps you absorb iron. They tell people to donate blood. So it seems to be the exact opposite of what I have found to be beneficial to clients and to women.
Yeah, and they had a protocol. They've got some kind of 10-step protocol things on their website.
Yeah.
Again, I really tried to read some of their blogs and they were very hard to decipher, like
Yeah.
the information wasn't forthcoming. So just if you come across it, I mean, go right ahead, see if you understand it. If it's right for you, then please feel free. But I personally couldn't understand the philosophy and the idea behind their recommendations. And I also think that pregnancy is actually a really short time. And it seems like the protocols that they're recommending take quite a while if you're looking, and their protocols they applied to general sickness outside of pregnancy. So maybe some people would have time to experiment and work with some of those protocols, maybe not to any ill effect. But I think in the short period of time that you've got during pregnancy, that going through something like the root cause protocol, it's kind of not in the interest of like a speedy recovery from what you're feeling. Like if it doesn't work, you really a lot of time to change your mind.
They do talk about kind of holistic care and food-based supplementation. So we would agree in that respect. But actually, Mel, you and I are also looking at the true sense of the root cause. We're looking at the whole picture for a woman. We're not just looking at an isolated item. We recognise that it's in the context of her whole body and reasons she might be. And I think that's what we want to do, take a really holistic approach and help a woman feel as well as she can. Because if she goes into her postpartum feeling boosted, she's much less likely, research shows she's much less likely to have postnatal depletion or postnatal depression, which makes sense. Like if you are anemic, you feel pretty ordinary. So we want to give women and help them to have really good starts to their postpartum. So I think, we look at the broad picture as well. And if your clinician's not necessarily doing that, you can do that. Find what you need, look at your diet, your supplement. That's kind of what my masterclass was for. It's aimed at midwives and clinicians, but I've had family and friends and clients use it and find it helpful as well, because I've tried to keep it in very everyday language and make this information really accessible, because so many of us are probably anemic or iron deficient, at least, even when we're not pregnant.
It was a great class. I really enjoyed it as well. And I think too, if you feel like you don't have access to a clinician who can really pay attention to, if you're not feeling great in your pregnancy and maybe you're in a fragmented care model where you don't really have a lot of time with your practitioner, or you see somebody different every time, or, you say, I want to check my iron, and they say, you don't need to check your iron, we've already checked it. It's okay to race off to your GP if you have access to a GP. I really want to check my iron studies and my full blood count, because I think I might be iron deficient, but I just don't have access to these tests through my maternity care. That's completely fine too. It's actually completely within the scope of a GP to be able to find out if you're anemic. It's not complex, and in fact, you may even be able to decipher your own blood test results and make your own decisions at this point. Great. Look, I feel like we've given just the right amount of information in this episode. Thanks for being here, everybody. That was this week's episode of The Great Birth Rebellion, and all of Jaimee's details are in the show notes if you want to pursue her resources further. To get access to the resources for each podcast episode, join the mailing list at melaniethemidwife.com, and to support the work of this podcast, wear the rebellion in the form of clothing and other merch at thegreatbirthrebellion.com. Follow me, Mel, at Melanie the Midwife on socials, and the show at The Great Birth Rebellion. All the details are in the show notes.